Yes, I'm here and doing what I usually do. And just in Baltimore City, it's kind of quiet. And the governor just announced that there'll be a stay at home
Mandatory shutdown. Stay
mandatory.
at
Yeah,
home.
stay at home. Thankfully, I'm in construction, so I'm considered essential. But got one of the guys that I worked with for many years. What'd you think about the shutdown, Paulo?
Well, we can still work.
Hey, that's it.
I'm
That's
glad.
that's
I understand some people can't feed their family. Did you know that 20? How many? What's the percentage of people in Baltimore City that are on some type of federal assistance?
it
Whether
was like almost 25%.
how much did you say, Andre?
I said it was almost 25%.
But what'd you say is Paulo?
Close to half, probably.
He says close to half,
Close to
probably at
half.
least.
Well, we didn't count everything. So
70%.
if you look at all
What'd you
the
say?
assistance,
Could be even more than that.
Yeah. So you think Baltimore is going to be affected by the?
I think they did good. They shut everything. They shut the train and everything down, the light rail.
And incrementally, they started to shut things down.
hmm yeah, if you
All
close
right.
public transportation down in Baltimore, that's a wrap.
They shut mass transit down.
That's exactly what Paulo just said without hearing you, Andre. That
hmm
once you shut mass transit down, it's a wrap. All right. So good evening. I'm sorry. Good afternoon to my co-hosts,
Good
Ezekiel
afternoon.
Kelly and Andre Robinson. How y'all doing?
I'm good.
Under the circumstances,
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
We got to find some levity in it. Like Paulo said, he's glad he's able to work.
hmm
Not many that can work are working. Um,
yeah, I was putting my back into it this weekend. I got some vegetables in the ground, and
oh wow.
that's nice, but tomatoes take 90 days. So, hey, we're going to be eating good in July, man.
Lettuce takes 30 though, right? Less than 30.
Lettuce less than 30
Mm-hmm.
if you have enough of it. And that's the only thing. I'm trying to get successive waves of it because so it gets consumed. But anyway, I mean, none of us have ever been through this before. So I think we're all just finding our way.
Yeah,
I would agree.
yeah. So, what's on the agenda for today? Are we going to talk about the mandatory shutdown or the mandatory stay at home? We don't want to call it a lockdown or a shutdown because
Not
Ezekiel, I
that
think
yet.
you were reading to me earlier that it's not quite there.
No, it's. I mean, it's basically everything you can do without saying we're forcing you to stay in the house, because I think that would cause.
It'd be a panic.
Yeah, there would be an instant panic, especially among the parts of our communities that we were talking about last conversation. Uh, People would instantly go into panic mode, and there could be all sorts of issues that I don't think the state or the city are prepared to deal with in conjunction with the pandemic that we're currently experiencing. You don't want looting, violence, whatever else is on the list of things that happen when people are told that they are not allowed to leave their house for 2 weeks.
Yeah, we've also seen that before that, part of the uprising was certainly fomented by the police cutting off public transportation, not letting the young people that had gathered at Mandama go home, right?
Yeah.
Because they shut down transportation. And they then decided to just protect the areas of the city that are quote unquote important to them. So one of the things I noticed last night in just moving my car around the corner was that all these young people were congregating in the park. And there must have been about 60 of them over there.
Mm.
So I'm thinking, they don't have Wi-Fi at home. They're barely, involved in studies. The good students may be mixed in with the not so good students in a mix like that. And we have nothing for them. We can't play games. We can't gather them. We can't do anything. So it seems like a little bit of a recipe for like the previous disaster that was the slow moving expected surprise disaster. has arrived because you have no local infrastructure to engage them. I know some of them, but I don't know the rest of them. So if you prevent them from begging on the corner for, for dollars to wash your window 7 times before you go from place to X, and that's been cut down, how are they feeding themselves?
I don't know. I have no idea, honestly. Yeah, I mean, I think that currently the way I'm feeling, honestly, I'm not feeling any sort of panic or hopelessness or anything like that. I am feeling generally optimistic. I am forcing myself to continue to be as creative as possible in this moment. I think now is the time. I mean, kind of always the time, but now specifically is the time to be creative and do the things that we're currently doing. Start these types of conversations that hopefully continue and live outside of the quote unquote pandemic, and that challenge the status quo after this has all been settled, because it will all be settled at some point, whether it's a year from now, whether it's 6 months from now, the dust will settle. And I'm, someone can quote me, but I can promise you that 6 months from now or a year from now, some people will forget this even happened. In a weird way, we have this weird sense of these amazing things happen, these amazing events happen in our history, in our society. But even with presidencies or whatever, we adapt very quickly as humans. We figure it out very quickly and we adapt to the new norm. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I am saying that I hope that we don't forget the humility that we talked about in the last conversation that we're all kind of getting a dose of. And also, I hope we don't forget those in our community that need help the most. So I hope these ideas live through.
I think that human nature has a default button that it sets. You cognitive dissonance says that, oh, I don't want to actually imagine all the worst of the things that can happen, but that also points to a lack of preparedness when things that are bad show up. I think that's part of the challenge, is that we had all of these issues that were forcing themselves towards a crisis anyway. And here's this thing that kicks in. And although I am generally optimistic, I'm not as optimistic that we'll forget about this era, because I think there are collapses that are necessary, and there's sometimes greatness is thrust upon you. And so this is the moment where, yes, people could turn out to be as great as we would wish them to be, but they have no, all the divisions that were baked in, all the inequities are baked in, make this very, very different than any other time where we faced a major catastrophe. This is World War Z. This is a level of breakdown in society that could almost explode to a certain extent, because it's a slow moving crisis that's coming to us. And as we've been saying, our communities were already in crisis. So where is the resilience as a group when we can't do the main thing that we would do, which is to gather? So all of these great things that are going on in these buckets, without creating or having a giant platform, like somebody was just asking earlier, well, are they getting laptops to the kids so they can get online? I was like, what laptops? What online? I mean, these are, again, critical issues. These kids are facing a year gone of their education. So there's some big moves that are going to happen in between here and now. And again, governor's not on my street. I mean, I saw him on the television earlier, and he can send down an edict, but the only presence in my neighborhood is the police department.
Yeah. I was talking to my dad actually earlier, and we were talking about we potentially have some things that we have to move from one office to another office. I also have to get a new water heater. Just realized that my water, guy just came in this morning and said, I shouldn't be able to put my hand on the pipe that's connected to the hot water for the water heater and hold it there. It should be a lot hotter than that. So long story short, I'm gonna have to get it replaced. And he was texting me and said, I don't know what this means for me. So like you said, there is this sort of edict that's been passed down, but it hasn't been really fleshed out. It hasn't been explained to people. I read an article about it that kind of said, well, don't go out shopping for clothes, but if you need to get piping to replace plumbing in your house, then you can do that. So that's kind of one of the examples. But a bunch of people have texted me. My mom called me immediately, and people are wondering, what are they allowed to do? There's a fine, $5,000 potentially a year because you get a misdemeanor. Are police going to be patrolling the streets? Are they going to be stopping people?
Can a plumber come to your house and connect it?
Can he connect it? Am I going to have to worry about profiling if I'm out and about in certain neighborhoods? Like, because some people also don't have cars, so I'm probably less likely, maybe, if I'm in a car driving in a certain day. I mean, I don't. What does this really mean in reality? Like you're saying, for people on the ground.
And also, it's March 30th. What are we? If we're looking at a year-long, slow-rolling, escalating crisis, this is March the 30th.
Yeah.
By April 30th, let's just project 60 days out, right? Now it's May the 30th.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do we think a neighborhood that's already in crisis will look like by then, when there's a mass of drug dealing and using? I can see, 100 yards from my window, and the police are circling constantly overhead now because those guys are going to be desperate as well, right? Their customer base is drying up. People who would normally just be buying from them easily on a daily basis are now really going to be pressed for cash. So again, I'm not just trying to depress us all. I'm just saying that what we are attempting to do here is to get some thoughts organized, right? But we're going to have to quickly see how to add 60, 70, 80 people to a platform so that we can share resources. You call me and say, hey, the guy will deliver the water heater to my front door. Can 5 of my friends come over and help me? Nope.
So how about we plan to have an ideation session on our next call?
We need to do that. We need to add.
And we have at least, and each one of us have at least 3 persons join in.
Mm-hmm.
And
do you know what the maximum is? Do you know what the maximum is?
Right now, we can have over 100 participants, 300, right? On Pro or whatever.
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
That's more than enough.
We're not going to reach the.
Yeah, I think it would be a Tower of Babel to have more than 5 or 6 people.
Yeah.
Weighing in, but it would be good to be able to have some other guests and thought leadership and just connectedness. I just don't see any other way of doing this without creating a community online that can share information and offer whatever support we can to each other.
Yeah,
especially with the shutdown, yes, and then maybe we can all moderate those that want to ask questions, and we can figure it out. Because
the administrator should usually be able to, could modulate how people weigh in, or.
Yeah, I can mute people, unmute people. There's a whole bunch of stuff we can do.
Yeah. Can we indicate when we have a question to ask so it doesn't become a cacophony?
Yeah, so we can make someone a participant, which means they can only ask questions through chat, and we can invoke the chat part of this, which most streaming platforms that I use in which I watch people have conversations or whatever, chat is a big part of it. So people can really have conversations through chat, and people spend 4 or 5 hours watching one person talk, and they just talk in the chat room.
Right.
So we can totally do that and sift through the chat room and go, okay, that's a good question. Hey, this question comes from blah, 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 user XYZ. What do you guys think about X?
Awesome.
So I think we could just
if you don't mind, I'd like to dive in on one of the subjects today, which we didn't get to the last time.
Let's do it.
And it's relevant, I think, in the moment that we're in right now, because it's a kind of a dilemma. So part of the advocacy of folks in the neighborhood was to release folks that are incarcerated because they are going to be more able to be injured by infection, right? Close quarters, lots of, barely credible health basis, inside of the incarceration, inside of detention in the first place, right? You're adding immigrants from other places. I mean, there's a bunch of conditions that would not bode well. how do you all feel about them advocating for almost, it seems like, system-wide release, which is, on one hand, good angel, that's a great idea. Let's keep them from getting ill. Bad angel, and go where? Where are they going to be released into? It's not like there's a loving, welcome, warm reception for returning citizens at the moment. So where do they go? If in fact you just kick them out of prison, they don't get their medication, they have no way of feeding themselves, they've been, used to being institutionalized, where do the advocates want them to? What great halfway house is there out here for them now? Because I'm not aware of it.
So I'm just gonna, my quick response really is I don't have an answer. First of all, I would be surprised if anyone had an answer. But what I would say is I watched an interview with Fauci, with Dr. Fauci, where he talked about the nature of the infection, the virus, and because it's cyclical in nature, and because they're seeing it in the southern hemisphere now, so they're going into their winter as we go about to go into our summer, which leads him to believe that we're going to see a resurgence in the fall of everything that we're experiencing now. Of course, by then, in theory, we'll be better prepared. That's the idea.
Maybe.
But maybe, right? So
did I hear you say Trump resigned? Oh, no. Okay. You said, right. Oh, you said better prepared. Okay. Got it. Okay. Sorry.
I know, right? That someone, one of my friends joked and said they should just let Fauci be president for the next couple of months.
Anybody else at this point, bro? Sorry.
No, you're good.
Your idea.
But the way he thinks about the virus is in many ways the way I think maybe we should think about these systems that you're talking about, in the sense of, we know the problem isn't going to go away, right? Reoccurring sentencing, we're not letting all people who are in prison out. We're only letting some. So if something like this happens again, we're going to have to deal with this problem down the road. We're going to eventually need a halfway house or some sort of facilities eventually. So us being reactionary and saying, okay, let everybody who's nonviolent out right now. I'm not judge, jury, and executioner on whether or not that's a good idea. But what I will say is people need to spend as much, if not more, time focusing on what you're alluding to, which is building those buildings, building those places for people, so that next time, because we know there will be a next time. I think that this is no longer a outlier. I think that we're no longer sheltered from, maybe sheltered from history in many ways. My generation has been kind of sheltered from things that people experienced normal, but the internet didn't exist, social media didn't exist, so maybe it didn't seem like that much of a big deal. But the Great Depression was, 100 years ago, maybe? Civil rights was maybe, 70 years ago? So like these big things that we read about in history books are really only one and a half generations ago, if that. So I think for us and for everyone, thinking about how to put things in place so that when it does happen again, it will happen again. We're not impervious, that we have a place that we go, okay, if we do need to release nonviolent offenders out of prisons, out of jails, this is the place that they go. These are the systems that are in place. If we do have a crisis in which people are not able to work, half of the population are not able to work, these are the systems. This is the money, or this is a account that everyone is forced to put money. I mean, I don't know, are these reduced costs for people making under a certain amount, they don't have to pay for food, or all the ideas that we're talking about, right? The ideation session, whatever bubbles out from that. And I don't know if it's a state by state. I don't know if states make their own mandates, because obviously right now the governors are kind of making whatever decisions they want.
They have to. They don't have a choice. There's no leadership
Well,
coming from the federal side.
I mean, but go ahead, Ezekiel. I'm sorry. You were saying, yes.
It was just my thought is, it's easy to kind of be, because the conflict or what's happening right now is right here, but after this ends, however it ends, it will happen again. Some version of it will happen again. Some crisis will happen and we'll be forced. And I just hope that we aren't having the same type of conversation. We're not hopping on Zoom again and saying, hey, what are we going to do about this again? because we've seen that happen with so many other things.
Yeah, people go to sleep after a while.
Yeah.
What were we going to say, Elijah?
So, like Ezekiel, I don't have the answer. And my mind immediately goes to what Andre was saying earlier as far as shelters. And nothing comes to my mind that immediately takes in what we call ex-offenders. So, shout out to Helping Up Mission. That's a great organization, but they require you not to have warrants or other things. And I'm not sure how that program currently works, but I know they are witnessing a surge in people needing their help. They're a shelter, rehab, and reintroduction into society for people that don't have work or were working at one time. But I'm not aware of just homeless shelters that may not be crowded at this moment. So we can begin to think about, at this moment, people have written letters to the governor, to the governor's office, and have gotten things instituted that were balked at, like takeaway cocktails, because restaurants could only do takeaway or takeout. For a moment, people were upset, and that was in danger that people could actually take away cocktails. And a letter went in, and the governor instituted and said, yeah, this is an initiative. We're going to do that. And somebody said, well, when this is over, why does that have to go away? And so I'm just saying, at this moment, we can proactively think like that. What is the letter that we're going to write? Is that what the ideation session is going to be about? What letters do we write and what to include in the letters, and actually write the letter and send it? And we all sign.
I think there's certainly something that we have to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So
you want to finish?
And just as far as solutions, do we write a letter asking the governor's office and the mayor's office for a particular building and a structure where these people that are being released can actually go and get a head start back into this system unknown, because they're not even coming back out into a society that they recognize regardless of when they
at all. Right. And also, I mean, it seems like there's room for the kind of thought leadership and ideation on systems, right? Something system-wide. If in fact you can commandeer stadiums and dorms, which are empty now, for hospitals, a shelter is just another version of what they've got inside with less support. Because if you're going to crowd them into shelters, then what's the difference between crowding them into a shelter where they're going to get exposed to everything open air, as opposed to being on the inside when those systems inside are already degraded to the place that it's equally bad one way or the other. At least in there, you can kind of sort of get a meal. Now you're outside struggling to get a meal and a place to lay down, which makes you prey to other things, including the impulse to go back and offend again. So I think you could take a nonviolent person and make them violent by just making them starve slowly on the street, right? So are we not then just kicking the can down the road by not reforming at a systems level? Because there's a graduated level of work that needs to be done. We need block by block, we need house by house, we need to know who our neighbors are. But then when you have these systems that are designed on this essential corruption, to pick up the theme from before, that you have a massive amount of people who are incarcerated who should never have been incarcerated. They're not even charged with a crime yet. They're just sitting there because they didn't have bail money. So is this not a time systemically to look at cash bail, like all these corrupt, really grossly corrupt things that are baked into the ecosystem that made now everybody almost a little bit equally pained, equally stressed, because now you're going to take this population that you've already degraded and say, well, we can't take care of you anymore. So it's like a pet, you know what I mean? You just take him, we don't take him to the shelter. We just take him for a ride and drop him off or her off. And even worse for women, right? Because they are sometimes needing to be reunited with their children. So how do we get ideation going, systems thinking happening at every level?
So I think even while you're saying that, I'm thinking myself as a property owner, can we, and since we're talking, we can discuss what we can put in the letter. Can one of the ideas be that current landlords in the city can register with Baltimore City or with the state to offer their home as a temporary shelter for those being released, and what that looks like, because who's renting right now? So,
right. And who pays for that, by the way?
And who's pays for that? Yeah, I'm saying, but who's paying their rent also?
Right.
So So if there's a partnership to say, okay, no water bill, we'll pay the gas and electric, and I don't know how that looks.
And 3 months of rental support, or something that says that, as opposed to just releasing hundreds of people.
Absolutely. And then there's a manager that maybe goes to each house, or maybe the landlord or the property owner is the one that checks in, but maybe they don't feel comfortable. So maybe there is a manager appointed that takes care of, say, 500 residents in the city where people are being released, and offering this as a head start for them. And in the meantime, this forces also another system to come online, that when this starts to dwindle down, hopefully it does, those same people that stayed in these homes are given job opportunities so that they can continue to stay there and pay rent.
Yeah, you use it as a place for engaging them, in other words.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. I don't see that as a bad idea. That's one idea that we present, and maybe they work on more of it. I don't know, but I definitely think we can start there, because what you're doing is putting together two needs. Property owners that need to rent their spaces out, and people that are being released onto the street with nowhere to go. They'll be released by the government. They were disrupted by the government, either by a policy bomb or a legislative landmine, as we said on the program last time. So some of them were disrupted, and now they have nowhere to go. So that's just one idea I'm thinking.
It could be also, and hopefully they're thinking about this, to study after the Depression, things like the Work Projects Administration and those other, massive public infrastructure kind of projects. It's not like all this stuff that was done 75 years ago doesn't need to be overhauled now. It's all overdue, right? And if we're going to have a massive clawback of the tax scam that says that now we need that money deployed to literally rebuild America, then you only have the real essential cultural revitalization that's going to be required to look like America looks, really, not just a specialized thing for a special group of people who are privileged enough to be friends with the Kushners, let's say, because that corruption will end us. We're seeing it in every system that we have, in the environment, in our monetary policy, in our housing policy, and so forth and so on. Those corruptions are lava, and they just destroy everything in their path. So is this not the time to go, wait a minute, while somebody's thinking about how can we get money to landlords so that the rent gets covered for 4 months and we ride out this wave, because just making everybody stay at home is only going to work until people are out of food, right? So 2 weeks.
If that. And I was going to say, on the previous point of the idea of landlords using sort of, I guess, maybe empty homes or properties that aren't being used right now. I think that's a good idea. What I would say is, like, what I would add to that is, I would imagine that going to the city or going to the state and asking them to create a new system. I'm sure without them saying, "Hey, you kind of figured out the way that the cocktails happened, right?" Any restaurant that wanted to stay open and wanted to do the cocktail thing, they did it. They figured it out on their own, and all he did was say, "Hey, you can do it." Um, Something like this is a great idea, but I think also because of the scale and also the federal and state implications uh, from a judicial side, you might be like we could leverage. I remember my mom was thinking about renting her home out to I think a foster family or some sort of state family, which in my mind means that there's a system that already exists, and you could just overlay, rewrite, update, whatever you want to call it, a system that already exists um, to this new idea, instead of maybe thinking about it from scratch level, because of the immediacy of that. So looking at that foster, whatever that foster program is, I remember she was thinking about it, and you get a certain amount of money or whatever. So like the state has already figured that out, or the city has already figured that out. So extending that to quote unquote fostering or returning citizen or what have you, uh, could be a big step in the right direction.
Okay, I'm just looking at a statistic right now. I think this is from somewhat goat. No, this is from the 2010 census. So it says that Baltimore's population is 620,000, 621,000, just about, give or take. We have 8,000 people from Baltimore that are in prison. So, and that's just state prisons. So that doesn't count jails and all the various levels of detention. So just to say, for just 4,000 of those people got released, or 5,000 of the $7,000 to $10,000 people got released. We couldn't handle 500 of them right now.
Correct.
So, not to be depressive, but I'm just saying that at some point or another, the incarceration machine is now here to kill us all if we don't do something about the fact that we have this system that's just designed to shove people who are surplus, right? Don't need them in the workforce. They're not skilled enough. 100,000 of people in Baltimore don't have a GED. I guarantee you that a great deal of that prison population also doesn't have the requisite skill sets to be able to go back to work even when there was work, right? You'd have to have massive training, all the stuff they did during the work projects administration, because it was done by somewhat intelligent, although immoral people. Immoral because they left so many people out on purpose. If you were Black, you couldn't get access to these things. So they were still dealing with segregationists. And the result of that is that now we have something that is a machine that feeds the beast. They build stuff, they make 60 cents an hour. So you see the enormity of the system's thinking that would have to go into absorbing even half of that. This is 2,000 people that you're going to release.
So an idea quickly. So the college I went to, it's like one of one colleges that allow, if you get in, 100% tuition free, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the way that they structure everything is everyone's forced to have a job on campus. And why I'm thinking about this is I'm thinking, okay, we have the issue of people, right? Unskilled labor. When I was a freshman, I was very unskilled. I worked in a dish room. I washed dishes. I served food. Something very similar to what people may be doing if they're imprisoned or whatever. You get certain type of work opportunities in there. And me and my friends freshman year, we often joked about how in many ways it was similar in terms of the jobs and kind of how we were forced to work. But I say all that to say, if there was a way to create some sort of school or some sort of program that's not just focused on housing, that housing, yes, is an element, but the dorm idea that you mentioned, repurposing dorms to house inmates, ex-convicts while they're working. The work that they're doing, they don't make any money, but the work that they're doing pays for their food and their housing, and also allows them to get training in the interim. Maybe at the end of this 3 months or whatever, they come out with a certificate or a job or whatever. But I'm trying to think of a way that doesn't put so much pressure on the city or on the state, in the sense of, where do we find the money? Where do we find the money?
Well, it's interesting that we can find the money
Oh my goodness!
to
Yeah,
incarcerate them.
yes.
Almost $45,000 a year
Yes.
per person, just in state prisons. So let's just be generous, and I'm not talking about city jails and all the rest of the machine of incarceration. So just round it off and say that between what the state pays, meaning what we all pay for that person to be incarcerated, plus what the family has to kick in and all of us aside, let's just round it off and say $50,000 per person, right? That the cost savings of that, if in fact, Eli is a landlord, I have been a landlord before, and if you got half of that, $25,000 per year per person, put 3 or 4 of them in a house, wouldn't you be okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now that person's going to have access to, you won't leave him there and just go, oh, he's formally incarcerated. You'll be engaging that person. There'll be training, there'll be access, there'll be a community that is going to be welcoming that person and wrap around them, considering that they do the right thing to stay out of prison. So if we had that kind of leadership at the top that says, no, we're not just going to talk about what's bad to do with those people. We're actually going to do something. We're going to take this moment and look at the savings. $25,000 is going to go to the landlords. $25,000 of the savings just goes back to all of us to share, that you actually could unpack a house that was not quite full. Most of these houses are 3 or 4 bedrooms, right? You don't have to stuff everybody into one place, and then kind of give them a pathway back to become a part of, to the bosom of their community, right? In other words, they're welcomed back in because they're actually working on the roads and working on the streets and so on and so on. Some of that stuff requires training. A lot of it is on the job training.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's great. I mean, but who would you replace? Who's the leader, right? You said, is it a president? Is it a governor? Is it?
No, I think I think there's hyper local. Our governor cannot run again, and he's the one who shut down the training programs for incarcerated people currently. So I'm not counting on him to suddenly get religion on that black people are valuable. I'm really just not. I mean, I'm not, I don't have time to concentrate on him alone. I'm just saying that. So where's the champion?
That's what I was saying.
We look at the old way of being a strong FDR type leader that steps up and goes, hey, this is what we're going to do. Okay, clowns at the federal level, a crook at the state level, and then I don't know what the hell is going on at the local level because they're all auditioning for the job. So anything they say might be used against them. So I think that's part of the issue, is that we're in a very particular kind of place that without the hindsight of, well, we know this guy is reliable. Look at what he did. We can count on him. So I don't know. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just saying that we need to look at the math that already exists.
Yeah.
50 grand per person times 8,000. That adds up, boo. That adds up.
Yeah. Wow. Astronomically. And the 8,000 is just the people in state prison. That's not the jails and all that. Hold on. Wait a minute. So you said 50,000 times 8,000. So you add 3 zeros
times 8,000
is what? Is that 40 million?
400
million.
$400 million.
1 million.
We spend that.
I didn't want to accept that it's 400 million.
Yeah,
400
I'm just thinking that 40 million would be kind of reasonable. $400 million.
$400 million, and we know it doesn't work because so few of them come out reformed.
Well, with that type of money,
prepared for the work world.
With that type of money, it is working. The system is fixed.
Hey, brother, somebody.
No,
that's a lot of toilet paper being used in that prison, isn't it? That's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. Why should it work?
That's a lot of folks eating off of that.
But see,
eating off of us.
This is back to to what you said about the system is built on these corrupt the foundation,
Practices.
right? So
Right.
so it's like if I build a society on prison or on cheap labor, I just looked up how much do incarcerated people make to earn in each state, right? Some people make $0, 0.25% of a cent. Some people make, whatever, right? They make
60 cents an hour and
60 cents an hour.
That's
Like,
New York, right?
whatever
right?
it is.
Nothing. Alaska makes pretty high. But the point being, if the whole system is built on, there needs to be a base, and sometimes that base is invisible, right? Sometimes we don't want our main society to see that here are these other people that are subsidizing the system. May not be subsidizing me or you, but it's subsidizing the system, things being as pretty as we want them to be, right? I don't know how or what are the ways in which the prison population is subsidizing everybody on the outside by all of the cheap labor that they're doing.
That's right.
So unraveling that, demolishing that, dismantling that, replacing that, I don't know, but I like the idea of, okay, we already know that there's X amount of people that are returning here. On average, I don't know how much per day or per year or whatever. Focus on those people that are returning so that they don't re-enter and basically starve that system. Try and starve that system.
So I agree. My question is, I'm circling back around to what Andre originally asked. In the meantime, or as I allude to that song lyric again, what to do now?
I think that part of the challenge is that we have to allow ourselves to be visionary, and I mean to be unrestrained by, well, what does it cost? Well, there's clearly money. Money's in the system, and this system is certainly easy to understand why. You could see there's a certain amount of corruption baked into there. But the real question, I think, for us as a society is that how do we get ourselves off, how do we wean ourselves off of the corruption that we've all become accustomed to?
Exactly.
That to a certain extent, it used to be quite legal for somebody to walk into your house and tell you, I want your house, get out. And if you were Black, you had no recourse about that. It wasn't that long ago, within recent memory of people that are still alive today, right? You had to get off the sidewalk. They could do anything to you. They could come in, they could rape your wife, they could do anything they want to, and for the most part, count on getting away with it. So all that stuff used to be legal. Now that it's become illegal, the practices went underground. They've now become hidden. And it's like, well, if they're an ex-con, quote unquote, they deserve it. This is here to punish them for stealing a candy bar, and he stole it 3 times and there's a life sentence. And I'm not even being fanciful about that. We've seen, I'm not being facetious about that. We've seen these things happen. So if this stuff is happening in our name, is this not the moment where someone could go, wait a minute, hold it, 400 million? There's a lot we could do with that. I know Elijah could use it. I could use it. I could use 1/10 of 1% of that and get a subsidy to start to do each house. These communities are distraught and they're broken. And this is how they stay broken. You undermine the school system, which makes people available to be trafficked in drugs or crime or whatever, or sex trafficking. And then if you can't enter into the free labor market with your skill sets on display and get the top price for them, then you'll be surplus. And we built a nice little place to handle that, where we make 50 grand a year per bed times whatever number you agree is the right number. Because that's not, remember, parole, probation, it's a big number of people.
So the 400 million is, we obviously don't have access to. Well, yeah, that's just state. We don't have access to it.
That's just state prison.
But again, I pose, because Andre, I know the neighborhoods that you live in, and you have alluded to the crime that takes place all day, every day.
Nightly.
What does a person like you or persons that live on your block, what is an immediate answer or is there one?
I don't think there's an immediate answer other than a readiness, and some of us have been on this tip about pushing back on this for a long time. So I think that I'm looking at staying connected with my neighbors, getting ready for the zombie apocalypse as much as possible, and just instituting a kind of a shared economy as much as possible, which I was already doing, right? And many of my other neighbors, we check on each other. There's a lot of nefarious stuff that's already happening in the neighborhood, and that checking on each other also includes the police officers, by the way. We check on them, because if they go and get an AK-47 in the next block, that could easily land in a drive-by or collateral damage. So there's all of this community members that we have to check on with each other online in a community without the basic provision of that service. So I'm going to have to jump on. I'm asking myself a question. I'm going to have to run, but that is something that I think really deserves to be explored along the lines of what are we pressing the reset button to rebuild what? That's really where I think we are.
All right, so I'm going to draft the letter, and
okay.
Appreciate you all. We'll pick up the letter tomorrow. Absolutely. And discuss more whether we invite people or not. We can.
Love it.
We're free to, and let's see where this ends up.
Yes, sir.
This has been System Unknown for you all who don't know. We thank you. We thank you for joining us. And, all right. Thank you.
Peace out.
All right.